the chance to have me with you today. That song I created literally in about 2, 3 minutes last night. So it's I would love to say that it took an army of people working day and night just to prepare for today, but it's actually super, super quick. I played around with, yeah, maybe 2, 3 versions that I didn't like, and this was the winner. And I'll share with you the lyrics. It's with an app called Suno. And it's actually one of my most fun things to start workshops with or start presentations with, or even end team events, because people can create their own team song around, yeah, how they want to create value together or how they want to have fun together. Even some of the insights from a workshop you could even just embed into the song. And like most AI tools, it's not perfect, but it's a lot of fun, a lot of fun. Yeah, so in this session, we're just gonna talk just very briefly about me, my background, but in the meantime, I would invite Anna Maria just to launch the first poll we have for today, just so that I can learn more about who's in the room today, and basically where you're at in your own AI upskilling journey. So I really just answer as honestly as you can, whatever represents you best. And this is not about the company you represent or your own business, just you and your individual learning journey. I would love to know, the kind of just as a baseline for us today. Meanwhile, as you fill that in, just tell you a little bit about me. So as Anna Maria mentioned, my last L&D role, I'm currently on sabbatical for a few months, but basically I hold the product owner hat, which is basically the functional lead for skilling and learning at a large logistics company. And we do basically global cross-functional learning initiatives for all our employees. We have 76,000 employees or so in the organization, so quite large. And the last year, I was really heavily involved in upskilling our employees on AI, and very excited about this work, just because I saw very quickly the potential of this in the organization. And what's interesting, I think it's maybe relevant from this conversation, is that I don't have a decade of experience in L&D. My background's actually really nonlinear. But one of the stations that I did in the company when I first joined was in the data strategy team. So my experience being among all the people that were basically creating the AI models at the time, and this was 2019, so this is definitely pre-ChatGPT and the full wave of Gen AI tools. But this was really, really impactful because when I was then in the L&D role at the time that Gen AI hit us in the industry, I actually had kind of a little bit more background or insights or even connections in the company to the partners that could help us to bring this technology forward, and of course the learning forward. Very briefly, currently I'm actually on sabbatical, as Anna Maria mentioned. I'm really working now on building my creativity and embodiment practice for coaching, training. It's very different work than AI, but what's really interesting about it is that it's going to be, I believe, one of those things that highly complement our AI era. So we will talk about this too later in the conversation, but we will need a lot of AI skills, but we'll also need a lot of human skills to basically complement. And so I like to kind of play in the intersection of things, on one hand, super high tech, but on the other hand, bring it back to human expression, embodiment, and all of that. Yeah, that's it about me. So let's see what you've shared with us. So we have, I think the majority of us are not completely never experienced ChatGPT. I would be surprised if there was some of you in the call today, given that I guess this call will attract people that will have, so that, let's say the poll is skewed. It's not a representation of our population for sure, because you've tuned in with some level of interest. But we do have quite varied levels of expertise, right? So everywhere from I played around with it, fooled around, got to know ChatGPT perhaps, or some other tool, and then all the way to I train others. So quite some broad experience levels. That's great to know, because we're going to cover actually in a way not only your own progression in terms of upskilling, but also what the natural progression of an organizational upskilling is as well. Yeah, so I want to start us off with this quote. This is from the CEO of Google. So intelligence, or artificial intelligence, is one of the most profound things we're working on as humanity. It's more profound than fire or electricity. And this is talking about AI beyond just ChatGPT and Copilot, right? We're talking about the power of AI, broadly speaking. And so I'd love to play a game with you. And I really want to invite you to think about just a scenario where we're not just talking about AI for a minute, but just to try to put the technology and the upskilling required around this technology into more of a historical context. So if we are indeed, basically now navigating something as profound as fire or electricity, let's go back for a minute to 1979. Yeah. So not 1879, sorry, 1879. Let's imagine that it's 1879. And last year you read in the news that this guy, Joseph Swan from England, he just invented this thing called the light bulb. Yeah. And right after, this other guy, Thomas Edison, he bought out all the patents. And so he's now working on perfecting this light bulb so that we have a light bulb that is functional and that is stable and that can actually be lit up for many hours at a time. So you just read these news, you're following the trends, you're seeing that every couple of months there's some new thing that Edison's doing and his technology is getting improved, and oh my God, what is this light bulb going to do? And let's pretend that in this historical context there actually is a head of L&D in your organization. And you're this head of L&D, and you're just reading these news, you're just seeing, hey, look, all these things are coming up with the light bulb. And I would like to invite you just to put yourself in that L&D hat, but in 1979, and think about how might you bring about this topic in your organization? What does this mean for your organization? If you're like in a small business or a solopreneur also, what does this mean for you and your own business? So there's a light bulb. What is it, right? So how are you going to tackle it from a learning perspective? And I just invite you in the chat, if you have any ideas, like what is your role as an L&D person in the era of the light bulb? So help others adopt the light bulb. BS detection, very good. Yeah. Almonds and new Edison. Yeah. Help people cope with the changes and anxieties that the light bulb might bring about. Yeah, that's really good. Teach others to think about the light bulb. Yeah, introducing and showing how to deal with the change while implementing it. Yeah. Show that it's revolutionary and how can we adopt it? Invite them to share a light bulb together and gift everyone a light bulb and tell them to come back in a week and we talk about Anna Maria. This is like the most Anna Maria answer I could see. If any one of you has ever worked with Anna Maria more directly, this is very beautiful interpretation. So share it with them and gift them a light bulb so they can see for themselves. Yeah. Think about the light, actually, what it can do. The light bulb is just one of the tools. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, Lior. Yeah, show the potential of the light bulb. I would start by analyzing how it impacts the organization, bringing ideas around. It really needs analysis. Thanks, Sophia. Yeah. So getting really awesome answers. Yeah, and keep them coming. So really, I would have more than answers. I would really have questions like, what is our role? Like, do we teach people how to make a light bulb? Because I think for a long time, the conversation around AI has been around that. Like, how do we teach people how to make it from scratch? Do we teach people the dangers of electricity? Right? Very valid question. Like electricity is also, I mean, we can get electrocuted and die, right? If you don't handle it correctly. Do we teach people how to turn it on and use it? Just really practical, functional, also very valid. Do we teach people how to change their mindset about using it versus electric candle? Like, how do we handle the candle fans, the ones that are only about the candles and the torches? Do we teach people how their work and their lives might completely transform as a result of the invention? Can we, at that point, when we're reading these news, can we know what's going to happen in the rest, in the next 100 years? Can we imagine a world that is so lit up that now we're having an energy crisis? Like, can we ever fathom that, right? So there's so many questions that's so layered, and I would say there's absolutely no right or wrong, but it really also depends on the context of what you're trying to do, your intention, what kind of organization you're in, so many things. But I think we can all agree, at least, that at the very basic level, this is not something to ignore. Like, we're not gonna say as heads of L&D, hey, let's just look away and do our human thing with candles forever. Like, we cannot unsee the light once it's introduced in our life. So lots of valid questions, very complex and layered, but we cannot just look away. I really believe that our jobs as L&D professionals, they're being recalibrated right now. So far, we've really looked at, okay, how do we train the skills of, build your own light bulb or use your own light bulb? But this is so big, similarly to that moment of electricity, that it's not just about one single skill. It's actually around how do we take people along on this very big journey, and how can we use this technology that's actually pushing us to reimagine every single job that we do. Okay, I'm going to move on, but we're going to keep this idea of the light bulb throughout this talk. And so I would just invite you, as we go through it, that you just keep that in the back of your mind as an instrument, as a reflection tool, so that you can anchor some of the questions around something that we already know what happened afterwards. Yeah. So this has been my personal emotional curve on this topic. I just want to share with you, because if you're in this, anywhere in this, line, you'll see that it's very unstable. And we all have very different ways of interpreting this technology. So personally, when I started playing with ChatGPT, and I must say this was like a couple of months after it opened, I was not like, okay, it came out in November 2022, like the next day I was playing with it. No, I think it was January the next year, so a couple of months afterwards. But soon enough, I was like, ooh, exciting, very, very cool, shiny thing. This is like really fun and magical and probably something relevant for my work. The next thing, as I started playing more deeply with it, I was like, holy crap, this is huge, and everyone needs to be learning about this now. And so I went from like, this is going to be something cool, sexy, trendy, like I like it, probably others will like it too, maybe my boss will become very almost alarmist in the point of like, why is no one caring about this enough? Because this is so big. And then my next thing was actually, wait, this is way bigger than I thought. It's not just about like, oh, we need to learn this skill as soon as possible or we'll be left behind. Like, this is a massive transformation. This changes everything. And then where I'm at now, it's like, okay, settle down. Not everything, right? Like there's a lot of things that, it's not going to change overnight. It is really big. And so we're allowed to have all kinds of emotions and feelings about it. And we're allowed to, go through our own personal roller coaster about it. But there's a lot of things that it still doesn't change. And now I'm coming down to that. And I think we all can kind of have our own little experience with this. I see that, yeah, Liz, thanks, but I was not the only one going through some of these. So what we know, so some facts, what we know is that our current job landscape, we have about 62% of our work time, especially white collar jobs. Our work time involves language-based tasks. Yeah. So it's not that all the work we do involves language-based tasks, but a very large percentage. And this is not jobs. This is time spent doing work. Yeah. So what that means is actually that we are already able to, I wouldn't say fully replace, but augment a lot of the tasks that we do. Because a lot of times, let me back up because maybe I went to this one too fast. So there are multiple forecasts trying to estimate the number of jobs that are impacted by the technology, and we don't know how many jobs are going to be impacted. But the 62% is the time that we're spending doing large, language-based tasks. And so technology like ChatGPT can basically support us, if not replace it or augment it. So what happens is that jobs across the whole value chain, including marketing, finance, logistics, human resources, all of these jobs are broken down into a series of tasks. So if you have a role, it's going to be basically then evaluated based on things that can be only done by humans, things that can be augmented by AI, and things that can be completely automated. So that's what at least the reports on these, the future of work, the McKinsey's, the World Economic Forum, this statistic comes from World Economic Forum, right? But basically that's going to be the split. It's not about like replacing the job. It's actually going to be, does it automate or does it augment a specific task of the job? And then what is the part of a job that is only human only or human with AI? If that makes sense. Yeah.
Is a language-based task everywhere where we use text? Is that what it's meant by that? So typing emails or requesting something or reports or PDFs, or is that what a language-based task is?
Yes, but it also involves voice, right? So it's not just, so it can be a conversation with a customer service representative, for example. It can be, you're learning from a video. It can be, so anything that involves language. So it's not just written, but it's also verbal, it's multimedia, all kinds of things like that. Yeah. But if you think about, hey, I need to, I don't know, go out in the street and pick up a package from somewhere. Like, we're not at the stage yet where we would have the fully functional robotic agent to actually do that human for us. We're also not at the stage where, we can fully understand, I don't know, the emotions of our customers, or I don't know, there's a lot of things that are still left that are not impacted yet by the technology directly. But there are so many things that are in this hybrid where even if it is, voice, it's going to be in collaboration with AI. Yeah. All right. So to navigate this reality, because again, it is big and it's going to take many years. It's not just like one overnight, one tool, one thing. Like we're just at the cusp, we're just at the light bulb moment where we're like, holy shit, like this thing we've been working on. Because also the light bulb was not the moment where electricity was invented, right? It took many years of many kinds of inventions and things for, yeah, for the light bulb to come in, but it was just one of those very tangible things that people could access all of a sudden, even if they weren't engineers or physicists. And so the same thing now, we're just at the cusp where we're just seeing, oh, light bulb, but now there's so much more that's going to come that's just going to fill our world with, light. And so to navigate those first stages of introducing at least the light bulb into an organization, I created what I have kind of like a 5-step framework. And this is my making from early, it was last year when there was no frameworks around this, because we have a lot of learning models, a lot of things around but I felt was very unprecedented, and I felt it was very different that a lot of the typical skill training that we're doing in organizations. And so I kind of created this, but I've been testing it. So it's a work in progress. I share it with you as almost like a case study. Feel free to take it. Feel free to make it your own. Feel free to completely adapt it and change it, or take if you just like one element of it. But I've been testing it, and I would say I tested 1 to 4. Number 5, I think, is still in theory for me. But 1 to 4, I have at least some practical evidence of it, more or less landing. And I've also made adaptations since then, since the first initial conception. So let me walk you through the idea of this. This 5 steps are really just to navigate that change that, as I mentioned, is more than just one single skill. At this point, before I go into a deep dive, I would invite you for that second poll. So Anna Maria, if you can launch that one. And this one, sorry, there's a lot of options. You can just click all that apply to you, but I'd love to get a sense of where you're at as an organization. So whether it's a small organization or a big one, if you're a consultant or have some sort of role where you're supporting organizations, just maybe think about your top customer, or your top or ideal customer.
I messed up the settings, so you can only pick one choice.
Okay, that's okay. Then pick the one that's most. Thanks for that's totally fine. So let's pick the one that's most accurate. Yeah. But I do know that some of you might be doing more than one thing at the same time. Let's keep that in mind. Very good. And let me, in the meantime, so there were questions. So I think it's going to be bigger. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Yeah, emotional piece and social piece as well. Yeah, and where the technology is today, but where it might be in the future as well. I have something there, but keep those resources coming on the chat. Fantastic. And I seem to have lost the poll. You might, you're on mute, Anna Maria, but could you
I will close.
highlight?
Yeah, I will close it, and then I think it should resurface. It's probably somewhere on your screen. Let's see now. Share results. So I think that
perfect.
Everyone should see the results now.
Okay. So very interesting. So very few are, delivering training to the masses or mass specific. So we have a lot of, from having started to have some awareness sessions, waiting for policy. Yeah, I've conducted training for pilot groups. Okay, so we're in the first, I would say, half of the journey, most of us, even if there's some that are more advanced in the progression. And I wouldn't say it's like perfectly a linear journey, right? There's some that for some reason start with, running community peer-to-peer learnings, and that I think that's a great leapfrog, if you will, of going right to accessing peer-to-peer learning. But most people are kind of starting with the awareness sessions, and I'll tell you a little bit why. So the first thing that we're trying to do as L&D professionals is to change the narrative. Yeah, so there's a big narrative around fear, and this is not, it's not coming from any one direction. This is the real human thing. When we are faced with change, one of our first reactions is like, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean for me? Like, what does this mean for my job, my livelihood? And so this is perfectly normal. But again, similarly to the light bulb, like there is an element of safety that is very valid, but it's also so much more than that. So how can we create this sense of curiosity, a more holistic curiosity around it? And one of the things that I found brings really people along is fun. And I know that might seem very trivial, but it is, honestly, it is amazing what a song can do in a meeting of people that are just completely unaware, resistant, don't care about it. And then all of a sudden you bring, this song I made. Check it out. It's about you. And I've done this. I mean, you don't even have to do this with your colleagues if you're not allowed to use this technology at work, but like do it with your partner. Like I created a romantic song for my husband one day, and how cool is that? Like how we met. It was like the story of us, how we met. How cool, right? It doesn't have to be this huge thing, but it was like, it's something that just people can connect with right away. I've started so many meetings with just asking people around their happy place and then creating custom-made images in real time for them. I mean, these are old, like these images, you can see they're very clearly AI. If I did it today, hopefully they would be better. But still, it was just like such a nice thing when people tell you about their happy place or their, I don't know, experience in the mountain. You're like, ooh, does it look like this? And all of a sudden they're in, at least they're in for the conversation. Yeah. And the other thing we did was create poems. And I know this is maybe not so original anymore, but definitely a few months ago it seemed to be that we created just poems about the company, poems about the team, poems about. I mean, this was for a venture building cohort of we were training people on becoming entrepreneurs, and we build a little poem, and now I would add the song piece, right? So it's just these tiny moments of fun. The other thing is to make it really accessible and to make it very like beginner friendly. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that although if you're in the call, you're probably much more aware about this topic than the rest of the wider population. But an organization is made up of quite a broad demographic of people. And in our first sessions of awareness, like some people had never even, I would say again, never heard of it because they were in the call, but they had never played with it. Like almost 45% of people had never ever used ChatGPT or anything. And yes, this was maybe like, it was December 20 last year, so some months ago, but I would bet you that still a lot of people have not played with it, or at least only minimally. So we have to make it super accessible. And the whole topic at the beginning for us was changing the mindset from uncertainty to discovery, from fear to curiosity, from resistance to exploration. So all of these transitions that we wanted to make. Our first session attracted over 1,000 people, and we had people out the door. Like, we couldn't get enough people because we had a block in our Microsoft Teams account. So we had like 200-300 people outside and then requesting the recording. Like, it was immensely popular because people just wanted to know more. And I want to add here that at this point, when we launched our first awareness session, we had no budget, no huge buy-in, no policy, no no real big legitimacy to do this. And we did it anyway because my team and I felt like it was the right thing to do. And so we basically made it at a very awareness level. We brought in an external speaker. So we didn't make it about, we Schenker stand for this, but rather like, this is what's going on in the world. And you should know about it. And then we did bring some internal experts that were working on some internal projects related, just to also bring some level of internal expertise. But the message was not like the company stands for this, but rather this is a trend you need to know about, and more is coming. And then use it as a way to start the conversation with employees. It was very, very helpful, because as a result of this, we not only got a lot of momentum around the topic, but then we got interested parties, like the actual experts, having conversations with us. So we knew, we as L&D, we were like, oh, you guys are actually leading this conversation, not waiting for the projects to be done and then you jump on board at the last minute, but actually we're leading the conversation and we are bringing the experts along. Next one. Guidelines, governance, policy, those things are important. Like, this is, again, just like the light bulb, like, people will need to know what are the do's and don'ts so they don't get electrified. And with AI, let's be real, like, there's intellectual property topics, there's bias and accuracy issues, there's privacy and security, there's the social environmental impact. Like, there are things that we need to know about. We can't just sugarcoat and say, hey, everything's fine, everything's good. But there's a difference between understanding the risks and not doing anything because we're paralyzed by them. And so for this topic, this is one where it's important to drive, and I would say you cannot do it alone. At least L&D alone. It's about finding the right experts. It's around collaborating with the experts, because even if they're experts on policy, experts on technology, they're not necessarily experts on what people will understand with these policies. And these policies, for them to be any effective, they need to land with the people, and that's where you come in. What I found by leading the conversation, we were actually bringing the stakeholders together. So funny enough, like, our IT departments are very big and also fragmented. They're not necessarily always talking to each other. So at one point, I found that we were kind of bringing together, on one hand, the AI experts and the Microsoft Copilot deployment team, like the ones that are actually deploying the technology. And we were actually bringing the pieces together, which felt very bizarre, but it can happen where, sometimes you actually need to be the glue, because the glue is ultimately, it's like, this needs to land with the people. So yeah, and one thing I'll mention also around the policy, what we ended up with a code of conduct, and it was very straightforward. But it's really important that you don't reinvent the wheel, because I think where we got stuck at the beginning, where a lot of companies get stuck, is that they try to make this huge, like, new statement, standard, everything. But actually, especially more mature organizations already have a lot of policies. And even small ones, they need to have at least the basics. Like, you need to be compliant with, data protection. You need to be compliant, you probably have something around sensitive data protection for you have something in place already. And so it's actually about connecting the dots to existing policy and not always starting from scratch. But of course, it needs to be then somehow pulled together into something relevant for the new generative AI technology. Coming to the juicy part is the AI literacy. And this is something that I would say comes in kind of different layers. So because again, we were a large company that had already an AI data team. They had been doing trainings for a while, for many years already, but it looked like this. So it was like the path from AI aware to data, to citizen data scientists. So it was like a typical, like from awareness for the masses to educating people more to then enabling them to even like do their own, I don't know, like advanced, not advanced, but at least like relatively advanced models. Like they could code, they could, also create like very powerful data visualizations with Power BI, like basically be able to use, manipulate, and hopefully maybe model some data. So this was like the progression path for, I would say, 5 years or so. This is before ChatGPT came in. What I realized when we were facing this new wave of tools is that still stands, but the first layer needs to expand. And so the first level is like, yes, you need broad awareness, but you also need prompting basics now, because you don't just need to know what some model does, but you also need to know how to use it basically with prompting. And you also need some function-specific uses and limitations. So if you're in HR, you don't need to just know how to prompt, but you need to know what are the use cases really relevant for you in HR, or in, not even in HR, but if you're a business partner, or if you're a, I don't know, in finance, like if you're a project manager in finance, like what is your specific juicy cases? And that's still level 1, I would say. We're all on that level 1, but level 1 all of a sudden got a lot more sophisticated. Yeah. Just to give you a taste, so our broad awareness for the masses was implemented in we called it a skill up week. It was basically a big global event we run over 4 days, where we just did a huge big bang. And we opened with the global CIO and top management. We then followed with like full training sessions all around basically prompting basics, but for everybody. And this was, a few months later from that initial awareness session that I mentioned before. Yeah, so just a few months later, the whole topic got so much momentum, and we end up having the licenses for Microsoft Copilot. So we now had a legitimate tool that we could use and promote and communicate about. So then we run these like skilling weeks specifically geared around the use of Copilot. So that was like our big broad awareness team. And then the function specific, and that's still ongoing, but before I finished went on my sabbatical basically, I was running HR specific sessions. So they came in packages of like 2 times 60-minute sessions, like make it really short and sweet, but really focus on the HR specific use cases. And for that, I interviewed people, because even though I was in HR, I have no idea what the reality is of the job of every single function. So I wanted to make sure that someone that tuned in from, I don't know, our operational office in Vietnam found it very useful, as well as someone sitting in head office, So going back to like design thinking and empathy, and like actually understand like what is the job of the other person, and then bringing the technology to say, hey, this can help you too. And this is a sample training outline. You can take a screenshot or go back. I think I can share the slides later as well, but basically very straightforward, and starts very broad, like what is this all about? Intro into the tool, like whichever tool of choice, like some are using ChatGPT, some are using Copilot, Gemini, whatever it is that you're using. And then really prompting basic, how does it work? How does prompting differ from Googling? Sounds very basic, but actually a lot of people think, hey, it's the same as Googling. It's not. And then the specific use cases kind of also clustered around different categories, from generating text to processing, analyzing text, to using it as a brainstorm partner, ideation partner, and then image creation and image processing. So there's different categories of use cases. And within each of these categories, you can say, okay, how does one brainstorm if you're a business partner? How does one brainstorm if you're a finance project manager, So using those as broad categories and then specializing. Yeah, and then the last thing on training. We've just talked about all the prompting training, but let's not forget the complementary skills. And so this is what we kind of talked about, the human skills before. So this one's very controversial because there's so many people that really want to say that AI will never catch up to human skills in some domains. There's the camp that says for sure, like AI is already there in many domains that we didn't think would ever be copied or imitated by AI, right? So honestly, nobody knows to what degree AI will be accepted. I think that's a different question. It's not around like, can they do the same job as humans, but are they going to be accepted to, I don't know, like nurse you when you're 90 years old? Like maybe a robot can wipe your bum, but is it going to be accepted that they do that? Or will you still want a human nurse? I don't know, right? So we simply do not know the future, but some of the projections, at least, so this one's from McKinsey, talks about basically that we just have a range of of like kind of like a timeline in which AI will likely be at least as good as the average person. Yeah. So it's like the median skill level. So let's say if you're good at creativity, so here AI will be, already as good, even now, today, as good as like the most average, not that creative person. But it will take a few more years until they catch up to the top quartile of our population in terms of creativity. So it will take some years now until AI can catch up to our most creative minds. But what's a little bit tough is to say, hey, actually, it will never catch up because it's simply a matter of like accelerating technology we're talking about. So eventually, most skills, if we're looking at like 2060, 2070, most skills eventually will catch up. But I think, again, there's so many uncertainties that it doesn't help us to have too far of that philosophical conversation. What helps us is to know, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, what are the skills that absolutely make sense for your organization to invest in. That's the conversation I think is a little bit more practical and down to earth. Like right now, given that we have this very powerful technology and we're going to be collaborating with it, what skills do we now need for our humans to be really good at? And most likely, like critical thinking is top of the list because we need to know what is accurate and what's not. Creative and like being able to pull from different domains and being able to at least give instructions and curate, and there's so many things. And then there's the social emotional skills are super, super important because again, for a while, we'll be so much better than AI. Will we forever be better than AI? I don't know. But for the next 5 to 10 years, very likely. I'll pause here because I think we just have a few minutes, but is there any burning questions that I'm not covered because I'm not looking at the chat. Let's see. Love to see how many of those predictions come true. Yeah, that's so true. I have a lot of ideas that we'll be not only having probably robots wiping our ass, we'll probably have a lot of relationships with robots, most likely. Love with, you've all seen the movie Her, maybe. I mean, what seems completely far-fetched now, like I think in 30, 50 years, like you'll just not even question it, I think. So it takes some time for us to adjust to these ideas. I think that's the big one. But back to reality, back to today and on the ground, I think one of the most impactful ways to learn is from each other. And I don't need to give a lecture on community because we have we have definitely better people to do so. So if you have questions on community, go back to Ana Maria. But I will share just like 3 ways that I saw AI learning happen in community spaces. So the first one is, spaces that were tool-based. So these are, for example, like our Microsoft Copilot exchanges and community. So basically just the team spaces where pilot users of the technology and then the full masses had access to, bounce ideas or, hey, this worked for me, this didn't work for me, but really specific to Copilot. So this was like really when we launched the technology, and it was managed very centrally and also curated centrally because we needed to know like what's possible, what's not possible, when will the licenses be updated. Like there need to be that central management of the tool. But there was a lot of peer-to-peer exchanges through there as well. We also had like expert managed communities that were led by these AI, the colleagues from these AI strategy departments that had been doing this for a while. So they opened up, for example, a ChatGPT guild and a generative AI technology guild. So they were really just chat spaces, but people were constantly sharing the trends on these topics. And personally, like I think I was the only one that was not an IT person in those communities, but I learned so much. Like even this Suno music thing, like, I don't know, I only learned it from there. I didn't see it in my LinkedIn. I didn't see it anywhere. I just saw it because all these IT guys were playing with songs with their families on the weekend. And I was like, this is so cool, right? And so I think it's important to be aware and ideally participate in these spaces. And last but not least, again, the more traditional peer-led, like, I don't know, learning hours and things like that. So I personally run a lot of these just for my immediate colleagues, but I was really encouraging others to do the same. So how can we basically leverage the early adopters of the technology just to open up spaces? And I think this comes back to having that culture of learning where these spaces already hopefully are happening in your organizations, but to really empower the AI early adopters for participating and making their mark through these spaces. Yeah, beautiful. Last but not least, I mentioned this one was the one that I had less practice with. But I think it's so important. It's fostering that inclusivity, because the reality is, and these are from last year, end of last year, but I would say it's so interesting. Whenever there's a new technology, there's still a very big disparity between adoption across males and females of the technology. And the age group also matters, right? So it's how do we also bring those 55, 65-year-olds, like how do we bring them on board? Because they're going to be in the workforce still, especially this demographic. Like we need them on board. Like otherwise, before, if you think about, I don't know, the use of Outlook, Excel, like these tools that took, many, many years to be implemented and deployed in organizations, all of a sudden you had a disparity between the ones that had a huge tech affinity and the ones that didn't. But the reality is that this technology is moving so quickly that just being 1 or 2 years behind on using it makes a huge difference in someone's performance. Really, this is like the chasm of performance between someone that uses it and doesn't use it is already now today big, right? And so what happens when we have, you know, a huge disparity between the ones that are using it being young-ish males only in the organization, and then everyone else less able to use it. It's a problem. It's a really big problem. And so, especially in my last months in the organization, I was like having these conversations with our digital, not digitalization, our diversity and inclusion colleagues, and like, how do we make sure that this is embedded in our women talent programs? How do we make sure that it's embedded in our strategy towards accessibility? Like, how do we make sure that this is not just a topic of technology and being better than our competitors, but it's also embedded in across our social impact goals as well. We're almost out of time. Just mention one thing. So as a summary, really, that, our job, I think, our role is really to take people along the holistic journey, not just the tiny skilling part, but the whole journey. And also that we're really here to flash a light on the next skills that people need to learn. So the next 5 to 10 years, the AI skills and those human skills that are really complementary. But I want to finalize with this slide, like, where we sometimes forget is that we, as humans, we need to learn ourselves. It's not just about making our organizations future fit or our ecosystems advance, but like we personally need to be the ones experimenting, not only because it's super important for your own marketability and your own performance and your own all of those things, but also because I see that the ones that are experimenting with these topics are actually the ones that then are able to bring the organization along, because they feel more comfortable with the topic. So if you feel, hey, look, I'm slightly ahead of the curve, doesn't have to be more, but I'm slightly ahead of the curve of my colleagues, all of a sudden that raises your confidence to bring this topic further in the organization. So I would just really highly encourage you to play with it, even if they're imperfect tools. They're tools that they're getting better every month. To just see what's relevant for you and just start playing with what draws you in. What are you curious about? Are you curious about skill taxonomies? Are you curious about, like, I don't know, assessments? Or are you curious about just learning hacks and how to build learning culture? Or are you just curious about philosophy and something else? Like, it doesn't have to be L&D for you to be drawn into the tools. Just use it for, I don't know, you want to learn music and you want to learn how to play an instrument, like, use it for that. Just use the tool in however you want to, work, operate, or advance. And then by default, then you're going to have some actual skills to bring to others. All right, that's it for me. Sorry, I know I talked a lot. I hope that I could chat more with you, in a two-way direction. But let's see if there's any cool questions.
I think Joost had a question around the training piece, Paula.
Yeah.
Did you train on creativity, critical thinking, or also like tool-oriented only?
Yeah. So we have trainings existing in the organization around creativity and critical thinking. Like, we have a suite of different kinds of trainings. So what we did was actually emphasize, like, because every year we have, tons of trainings, but then we curate the ones that are most relevant for the organization and based on external trends and based on, like, skill gaps. Like, we do a whole analysis to see which are the trainings we're going to highlight that year. And then we definitely, creativity and critical thinking were on those. So we didn't create anything from scratch. for this past year, but rather emphasize those skills as really important ones given the landscape. Does that make sense?
Definitely, thanks.
All right, there were no further questions in the chat, but there's 30 seconds to raise a hand and ask a question if you are left with.
Yes.